from the war, son. I got a plan to get you rich real quick. So here, listen up. Here's the plan. See the woman there from the Osage Tribe? You are gonna go and woo her. Make her fall madly in love with you. Once you got that done, get married, have a few kids, and then, inconspicuously, we'll get her murdered. After that's done and out of the way, the land rights for the oil come right to you and me, baby. And then just like that, we get the money, and money is power, so we sitting fine. You got that? Yeah, sure. Why, she's gorgeous.
Everybody shut up and action.
Alright guys, let's talk about Killers of the Flower Moon, a movie directed by Martin Scorsese and stars Leo DiCaprio, the man himself. This movie is essentially a story, based on a real story apparently, about a group of people back in a long time ago, when the Osage Tribe was having the people married after they found a bunch of oil in their land or something, and then a bunch of rich white men decided to marry themselves into the families and then killed them, gaining the oil rights and land rights for themselves. That's essentially the plot of the movie. It's based on a real story trying to depict this time in history and the people of this time in the actions they took against the Osage Tribe and the Osage people, and it's just a story about that entire thing. And in all honesty, this movie was boring. Don't get me wrong, when I say boring, I don't mean like it's a movie, yeah, it's 3.5 hours long, why am I going to bother watching this? I'll go watch Ant-Man Quantumania instead. Hell no! This movie was boring, but actually interesting. Like, I'm just saying boring because it's not the type of story that really captivates you, makes you emotionally engaged with the characters, or the type of story where you actively want to just sit there and watch and experience a new world. It's based on a real story, but you know me, when I watch movies, I like watching movies from the perspective of it being fiction. So even when I watch biopics or anything, I just watch it as though it's a fictitious movie and enjoy it, and then I can just think about it afterwards as a biopic or whatever it is, or the true story of it. I just enjoy watching movies as fiction. So I went into this movie not even knowing it was based on a real story, and I was just bored by the story. But at the same time, the entire way the story is told from some kind of reverse murder mystery sort of perspective, where you see the murderer, you know who the murderer is, you see them plot and go through with their attempted murders, whether it be on people who are a part of the Osage Tribe, people who are trying to stop them, people who are trying to investigate this entire case. So instead of seeing the detective's perspective of trying to uncover the murder, we're seeing the murderer's perspective on committing the murders to gain whatever benefits they want. And it is a 3.5 hour movie that genuinely feels much shorter. Like, I was watching Ant-Man Quantumania earlier this year. It was like a 2 hour movie, and that one felt like it took a decade to finish. This one, it's 3.5 hours long, but you don't really question, when is this going to end, man? I've been sitting here forever. You don't think of that even once, even though it's 3.5 hours long. You're just sitting there watching the movie. You may be bored by the plot, but like, you're always captivated by the visuals, the mise en scène, the entire lighting and design of the scenes. You're captivated by the cinematography. You're captivated by the acting performances of the characters. Everyone had like an out of this world acting performance. Every performance was spectacular. And on top of that, while the story was boring, it does have a sense of interest developing in you on, will they get away with this murder? Will they not get away? Oh, whoa, the things are changing. This is changing. This guy's actually falling in love with his wife and doesn't want to follow through with his father's plan, his grandfather's plan. Like, it just keeps captivating you in ways. While you do get bored of the story, you don't want to stop watching. That's what I'm trying to say here. That's the entire feel of this movie. It's long. The trailer made the story seem really interesting, and here the story seems boring, but you don't want to shut it off. You don't want to go use the washroom and miss part of the movie. You actually want to sit there and watch. Yet, I don't know, for some reason I didn't find it extremely interesting, but it does captivate you in the sense where you want to follow the characters and see what will happen next. It's honestly just a love story, and a story about love. That is that is honestly the way I saw this film. It just feels like a really interesting love story, a boy going against his grandfather because he fell in love. And while I do say this movie is boring, it definitely feels like it's designed for a specific audience in mind. I'm not sure. Maybe if like the movie is really slow paced and it really fleshes out every little detail. I'm not gonna say it's as slow as like something like Dune. I do feel, or rather, it actually feels about as slow paced as Dune. So if you didn't like Dune because of its pacing, you might not really like this movie either. But if you're fine with the pacing, like I don't care. I'm not personally picky guy towards the pacing. I don't really like slow paced films. They feel way too long. But if a movie has good storytelling, even if it has a boring story like here, it does manage to captivate you and make you want to watch the movie through and through. Something like Dune, it didn't even end well. I was not crazy about it. Here, it's slow paced, yet it interests you. It definitely feels like it's more, this movie's targeted more for a specific audience that enjoys slow paced movies, and it's a movie that fleshes out every tiny detail, so you're not really left with many questions hanging on, wait, what's going on here? What's going on there? That doesn't make sense. How did this jump from here to here? It fleshed out every tiny detail, helping you understand everything in the process. I mean, I think the point of the movie was to try and depict the cruelty towards the Osage Tribe that the people back then were treating them with. So that's why they fleshed out every single detail. And going into this movie, I was just thinking maybe I want a movie that fleshes out every tiny detail. It might be long, but like it would be interesting to see that, and I got that from this movie. It was surprisingly coincidental, but like it actually fleshed out every tiny detail. It went long, but it was interesting. It was just interesting as a movie. It was interesting from a story perspective. It was captivating from a visual storytelling perspective. It was just an interesting look at a movie and filmmaking style, and I personally really enjoyed that thing. It does definitely feel like it's targeted towards a more specific audience. But overall, it is a truly beautifully shot movie and beautifully written storytelling style. The movie's not immersive. It's definitely not rewatchable. Watching it once is more than enough for my lifetime. But there are points in this movie where it does get confusing. Like, I mean, just from the accent, sometimes it might be difficult to understand. Other times, it's just, like, you don't understand what they're talking about or what's going on in the scene. But, like, later on, it does clarify itself with actions being taken or other dialogue being said, and you kind of understand what was happening in previous scenes. So there are points where you guys kind of get lost in the movie and then recover yourself, which I found kind of interesting, but I didn't really like that part. And on top of that, I didn't really like the ending. I feel like they could have made this an extra half an hour, and maybe for the purpose of time they reduced it, but the ending is like all of a sudden it turns into some true crime podcast, which I just felt ruined the entire mood of the cinematically shot film. And I thought if they went for another half hour, fleshing out every tiny detail once again and showing a proper ending, I thought from that perspective it would have been interesting. But seeing the murder mystery sort of end from that reverse style perspective, I feel like going into a true crime podcast and discussing this case kind of fit well with the story. But it's just, and while the ending did fit well, it just felt sudden and uncalled for, and it just kind of really felt like they were just doing it to shorten the time. While it does make complete sense, it just kind of ruins the reason I was enjoying the movie, which was watching the cinematics and the beautifully shot and designed setting of that time period, and watching it from that reverse murder mystery perspective. But it all makes sense, and it works well as an ending, just not one I particularly enjoyed, because rather than the story, which I found boring, I was enjoying the movie from the reverse murder mystery perspective and seeing how the old time setting and the shots from back then and everything from that perspective. But like, so yeah, that's the biggest reason I didn't enjoy the ending, though it makes sense and it was a good ending in general. Just not my preference. So yeah, overall, it's just the ending caught me off guard and felt kind of rushed and uncalled for. But besides that, I really did like this movie. Found it boring but interesting. It was kind of cool. It was a cool watch. If you're interested in checking out a slow-paced movie, this one might be one for you. I give this one a 72%. It's a bop. Go check it out. Peace.